It began with a letter. She has written 5 novels, 10 books of poetry, 2 of criticism, and 3 of short stories. There are 3 million copies of her works in print. She's published in 17 countries. She's probably Canada's best-known writer. She illustrates, she translates, she promotes, she reads publicly, and she supports causes that she believes in. Those of women and Amnesty International are closest to her. She's a formidable person. People become very excited or nervous in her presence. My letter led to this boat trip. We were to spend 5 days in August with her on the family island. Her family's been coming to this remote spot since she was a baby. Here she is doing the same trip with her mother and her brother Harold. This must be about 1942. And here she's with her dad, the zoologist. He's an insect expert, and this region used to be his base. Years later, when the little girl became a writer, this was the setting of one of her best novels, Surfacing. It tells the story of a young woman who comes back to the family island to find her missing father. He may be drowned or mad in the bush. What does she find? I suppose you'd say that she finds herself. But what would we find? It was 5 days, not only with her, but with her family. With Graham Gibson, the writer she lives with, and father of their kid, Jess. That's Graham on the dock there with Jess and her friend. Also her parents. We'd meet them.
You're very tucked away.
They'd thought to avoid us, but my collaborator, Marilee Wiseboard, has convinced them to stay.
We'll move it down here.
Hey, Jess.
Pick it up.
Now, you want to know how to
Yeah, what should we do?
comport yourselves. Well, the main thing is not to leave anything around that might attract bears, and that means that you burn any meat-type garbage or anything cooked, and any tin cans, you burn those out. And the rest of your food you either have in an airtight container or you put it apart from your tent somewhere.
Okay, we'll do that.
Now, we shouldn't have any real problem with bears here because it's an island, and they very seldom come here, but I wouldn't want to feel that you'd
Brought the
been
first bear.
gobbled up on my account.
Okay, we can do all that. Thank you.
We slide back through the gradual dusk. Loon voices in the distance. Bats flitter past us, dipping over the water surface, flat calm now, the shore things, white-gray rocks and dead trees, doubling themselves in the dark mirror. Around us, the illusion of infinite space, or of no space, ourselves and the obscure shore which it seems we could touch, the water between and absence. The canoe's reflection floats with us. The paddles twin in the lake. It's like moving on air. Nothing beneath us holding us up. Suspended, we drift home.
That piece is from Surfacing. It's not surprising that that strange novel, so full of ghosts, should be uppermost in our minds. And not surprising that we would wonder if it was partly autobiographical. I'm no sophisticated critic, but a reader with a reader's questions.
Well, Surfacing is fiction. So, I use settings, but that's not to be confused with using real people and things that have actually happened to those real people. Obviously, the fact that I've been around gardens like this all my life had something to do with Surfacing.
When you were writing that, did you have this one in mind, or in particular?
This one and the one before it and the one before that, we didn't always live right here.
But gardens are, it seems, magical places for you.
I love gardens. I just don't like doing all the work.
And that's just as poisonous as the mushroom we looked at. It's very deadly.
If you eat it?
If you eat it, yes. This is the stuff, by the way, that Socrates drank, the Greek who was forced to commit suicide. Poison hemlock.
In the prose poem, she says, people like to make poison. If you don't understand that, you'll never understand anything.
Barometer's fallen. Bad.
I find her really stiff in some ways, but she gave me a fantastic smile in the garden over there, which was nice. But when I started to talk about her work, I think she's very bored with talking about her work.
I said she's ordinary, but what's not ordinary is the whole continuity and routine with her family and her parents, which Jess, her child, is now partaking of. The noon swim with her mum, the 5 o'clock swim with her mum, the canoe, her and Graham, mum and dad, the whole extended family.
But lots of people have good relations with their parents.
Not like that, not tied to the land.
You don't think you're exaggerating a little? And I thought, well, maybe you won't want to talk about it.
I don't talk about things that I'm going to do, that I'm planning. I will talk about things that I have done.
You were saying that the first draft of Surfacing was a disaster?
It was pretty bad, yeah.
Why?
It had no, well, let's see, I wrote an unpublished novel first. That was in 1963. Then I wrote Edible Woman. The unpublished novel was never published because it was considered very gloomy. It was very gloomy in ways that nobody in Canada was really willing to deal with at that time at all. Then I started another novel. And the thing that was wrong with that other novel, which I never finished, was that there are 8 characters in it. And the story was told from the point of view of all 8. God. 4 were men, 4 were women.
Yeah.
And I had it all plotted out. It's the only time I ever used filing cards, and I will never do it anymore because it didn't work for me. But I had it all plotted out on filing cards that each of these 8 characters was going to have one section in each of 5 parts of the novel, making a total of 40 sections. And I'd gone through this scheme twice to a total of about 150 or 175 pages, and nothing had happened.
In the plot?
No events had taken place. We had interesting character sketches of all these 8 people.
Right.
But they hadn't done anything.
And even you were getting impatient?
Well, you can't go for 150 pages with nothing happening. So there were too many people in the book.
Yeah.
So I forgot about that book. I put it aside.
Right.
Then I wrote Surfacing in 1970, approximately, 71. And I had the same problem with it in the first draft that I'd had with that novel with 8 people in it, that I'd gone, 100 pages and nothing had happened. I had lots of landscape.
Lots of trees. Huh?
I had a lot of trees, but I didn't have any events.
Right.
So I really had to go back to the beginning and start all over again, which is what I always have to do with a novel when I come to a stop. I can't just go on. I have to go right back to the beginning.
Oh, do you?
As a writer, I'm a skier. I have to go right to the top of the hill and get up some momentum and just go as fast as I can all the way down to the bottom. If I fall part way down, I have to go back up to the top.
You have plenty of lift tickets?
I don't have any. I was taught to go uphill on skis this way,
I
go
see.
like that.
So it takes you quite a while
It
to
takes
climb.
me a long time to get back
climb
up
to
to
the-
the top of that hill.
Yeah.
That's her brother Harold, the neurophysiologist, helping with the dishes.
I was drinking in his words and smiling away, as conceited as a cock upon a wall, when all in a breath, back went his right hand over his shoulder, like this. Something sang like an arrow through the air, because he's thrown the knife, you see. I felt a blow, and then a sharp pang, and there I was, pinned by the shoulder to the mast.
Did the knife go about there?
Oh, just a little bit, just right through there, and mostly
Ouch.
through his clothes.
Huh.
Okay?
Like my ribbon here?
Yeah, like your ribbon. Both my pistols went off, and both escaped out of my hands. He let go of them, because he was surprised by them going off, too. They did not fall alone. With a choked cry, Israel Hands loosed his grasp upon the shrouds and plunged headfirst into the water.
How come?
He shot him by mistake.
Who did?
Jim Hawkins shot Israel Hands by mistake. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. Okay?
Please, more.
What's the next one?
It's interesting that she reads Treasure Island to Jess.
About to down to,
I know that she's very fond of 19th century writers.
All right, down to there. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Our captain stood on the quarter deck, and a fine little man was he. Overhaul, let your davit tackle fall, and lower your boats to sea, brave boys, and lower your boats to sea. The boats were lowered and the men aboard, while the whale stayed in plain view.
Oh my gosh.
In the prose poem, she says, "It's time to like men again. Where shall we begin?"
Peggy, would you mind autographing these books for me?
Not at all.
It's very kind of you. Is there any pleasure in having written them all?
Oh, lots, yeah.
What did you deal with when you first started writing poetry as a woman? What were you having to deal with?
Well, I'll just change it around a little bit and say that when I first started writing poetry, it was focused very much on what would be called personal relationships, which in my case means largely relationships with men. And I think one of the difficulties for women who have come from families in which the men are not exactly lacking in confidence, such as mine, is the realization that some men are frightened. You know, that some men are very vulnerable and anxious about things, and you usually can't see why. You know, especially if they happen to be anxious about you. You can't see why they should be so anxious and shaky.
Yeah. Well, you didn't come. Your family is not wimps. There aren't wimps in your family.
They aren't noted for self-doubt.
That was good for you.
Well, it was fine for me because it meant that nothing I did was threatening to them. They just weren't threatened. I could do really whatever I liked. I certainly wasn't forced into the role of having to play female. I never had any doubts that I was a girl. But I didn't see girls as threatening to men.
But what a shock for you when you started dating and going out, and there was this
shock.
There's this whole other world.
What did I say?
What am I supposed to say? And where did the circle game come from?
Oh, that was later. That was college. That was college. By the time I got to university, I was into reading Beckett and Sartre and wearing long black stockings. I'm sure you remember all this. And then you had to be gloomy. I mean, you had to be gloomy. And I wrote very gloomy poetry at that time. And I think I felt pretty gloomy too. I think the crunch had come. No, I think by that time I was really serious about writing, and that was when I started to run into men who would say things like, "But why publish?" Or they would pay lip service to the writing, but really it would be something I was supposed to do in my spare time. And I think it was probably quite smart of me, or really it was chance and fate. It wasn't smart of me at all. I didn't get married until I was 27 the first time. I didn't meet Graham until I was already 30, which seems young to me now, but I had published 3 or 4 books. So he wasn't in for any big shock.
And does that free you to be with a man separate, but with him in a way that wasn't before?
Well, of course, it depends partly on having found a good stern paddler. Guy with a good J-stroke.
Where does power politics fit into that?
Power politics is a transitional period. It's pretty early.
Yeah.
And it's not this man. It's not this man.
No, obviously not this man.
No, I've been with this man now for, I think we counted up, and it was 12 or 13 years.
So the poems You Are Happy, those are Graham.
Those are early Graham, if we wish to put it geologically.
Pre and post Graham.
The stratum, the geological stratum was early Graham, early Devonian. Barometer's rising. It's fair.
You were telling me when you were bringing the kids up how you tried to give them all that encouragement.
Yes, I can remember the first time Peggy made applesauce. I had to leave the kitchen. And I couldn't bear to see the apples being destroyed.
But you didn't tell her she was doing it the wrong way.
Oh, heavens no. Don't do that sort of thing. She'd never make it again.
Right.
If you did that.
Right. When Peggy was growing up, did you see any signs that she was going to do what she's done?
Well, no, I didn't, except that she started writing as soon as she could print.
Yeah.
With phonetic spelling.
What sort of things did she write when she was a kid?
Oh, she wrote in grade 2, she had a book of poems called Rhyming Cats. She was really crazy about cats.
Yeah.
And she wrote a play when she was in grade, let me see, she must have been in grade 1. She was either grade 1 or grade 2. And I think she's got it now. And she also made puppets to act the play out out of cardboard.
Right.
And the play, you want to hear what I thought was the best line in the whole thing?
Yes.
It Well, one character says, "And if I am telling a lie, may the moon fall down on me." And the next line is, "Crash."
No explanation, just crash.
Yeah.
Very frustrating. They are all, Peggy, her mother and her father, not much like the characters in Surfacing. Seems like I'll have to abandon the idea of its being autobiographical. But wait, the little essays coming up certainly are.
This is my father's section of the house. In my mother's, things are arranged on hooks and shelves in inviolable order. Cups, pots, plates, pans. This is not because my mother makes a fetish of housekeeping, but because she doesn't want to waste time on it. All her favorite recipes begin with the word quick. Less is more as far as she is concerned, and this means everything in its place. She has never been interested, luckily, in the house beautiful, but she does insist on the house convenient.
But there's surely to heaven there's no nail that can't be pulled out. That's enough force. That's right. Enough force, enough time.
My father looks at this dock, his eyes narrowing in calculation, his fingers itching, and sees mainly that it needs to be repaired. The winter ice has been at it, the sun, the rain. It is patched and treacherous. Threads of rot are spreading through it. Sometime soon he will take his crowbar to it, rip apart its punky and dangerous boards and the logs excavated by nesting yellow jackets, and rebuild the whole thing new. My mother sees it as a place from which to launch canoes, and as a handy repository for soap and towel, when, about 3 in the afternoon, in the lull between the lunch dishes and reactivating the fire for supper, she goes swimming. Into the gelid, heart-stoppingly cold water she wades, over the blackened pine needles lying on the sand and the waterlogged branches, over the shells of clams and the carapaces of crayfish, splashing the tops of her arms, until she finally plunges in and speeds outward on her back, her neck coming straight up out of the water like an otter's, her head in its white bathing cap encircled by an aureole of black flies, kicking up a small wake behind her and uttering cries of refreshing, refreshing.
I was wondering, do you have any particular philosophy of bringing up kids?
Well, justice, I think. What's your expression? Fair go mate?
Fair go, mate.
Fair go, mate. I think that's an Australian expression sums up our attitude pretty well.
Yeah.
That we always felt they should be treated fairly and that they should feel that they were being treated fairly.
Mm-hmm. And avoiding inculcating guilt feelings?
Yes, that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
Often things were decided by drawing straws. If there was
Mm-hmm.
a question who was going to go first and who was going to go in which canoe and
Mm-hmm.
so on, draw straws for it. And they accepted that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Peggy and I used to argue about literature, of course. I've done a tremendous lot of reading, and so we used to have some arguments about that.
Pie out, and then I'll test it with a fork to see if the filling is done. If it's soft, it's done.
What I'd like you to do, if you want to, is go through all of her novels and look what she has to say about parents. Okay? And then finish it up with those unpublished stories that she just gave us.
You do it, Mike.
For days now, I've wanted to ask her why her characters are often so cold, so trapped. Sure, they're often very funny, but it's a slightly bitter humour. I've wanted to ask her this, but haven't dared for fear that it would sound more critical than I mean.
Theodore Reich.
Theodore Reich. You see what it's called? Love and Lust?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of yours there.
Yes, yes,
Everything.
I noticed that.
Everything. I am hunting for patterns. I used the word pattern hunter, in fact, in a review that you wrote about Rider Haggard. It's a phrase I liked. And there are some patterns that are emerging in my mind. Well,
By patterns, you mean recurring motifs that
Yeah.
add up to something of
a
significance.
view of life.
A view of life. All right.
Yeah. The way you see life, and I'm even going so far as to say why you see it that way.
Well, I showed Marilee an article that said that, in fact, I have no view of life. So if you believe him, you're going to have to stop right here.
I don't believe him. I think you have a very strong view of life because I see a lot of victims in your books. What I think is victims, and I can tell you
if I
why.
hadn't written that book of criticism, nobody ever would have seen any of those things.
I reckon I would have.
Well, maybe.
There's a sense of people who are like puppets, that there are others pulling the strings, or let's say society is pulling the strings.
Which novel are you thinking of in
All
particular?
of them, pretty much.
Well, you see, I don't happen to agree with you about that. You can't really talk about characters and their real situations, for me, without talking also about what sex they happen to be.
Right.
Now, most of my characters are female characters. And in fact, for female characters in our society, glorious though that society may be in so many respects,
I detect a hint of irony.
choices are more limited. People don't usually mind it that the women kind of drift around, because that's what they expect women to do.
Right.
They expect men to put on their Superman suits and go and jump off buildings and, be heroic.
I know
I
that.
shouldn't say everybody expects men to be like that. I think that men over a certain age have that feeling about male characters in books, even though they themselves may not have accomplished that. They feel that male characters in books somehow ought to, or they feel that male characters in books by women somehow ought to.
Right.
I rest
know
my
that.
case.
But why does a woman who doesn't drift around, and in fact does so much, not write about women like herself sometimes?
I see a certain growing strength in women, and you are, for many, a good example of that. And I wonder how long it's going to take until that's something you will deal with in your writing.
Okay. That's the George Eliot question for me, which is, how come George Eliot, who was a successful female writer, never wrote about a successful female writer?
Except it's not, because in your criticism of or in your discussion of black women writers, you say that when something has happened for a while, and you said it before, that when the nuclear movement has happened for a while, or when something's happened for a while, then you deal with it.
Yeah, maybe I'll deal with it.
Okay, what about women in the nuclear movement?
Yeah, sure, I could write it and it would be believable and so on. But it's not... I think those are interesting questions, but they're not, in this country, they're not life and death questions in an immediate sense. I mean, I happen to believe that they are life and death questions. Sure, we're all going to be blown up. That's true. But in a way, that's such a huge event that, as many people have said, it's very hard to get your mind around it in any everyday way. In fact, I have written a short story about it. It's coming out this fall.
Oh, yeah?
But I think that's one reason that people are so drawn to places like Latin America, because it seems so simple. It seems so simple and dramatic, and that you could, quotes, write a story about it that wouldn't have, quotes, a lot of interiorization in it, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't happen to be our war. It doesn't happen to be a Canadian war. You could not, as a Canadian, write about that situation except as an observer.
So you don't think there is a Canadian tendency not to get passionately involved in those things? I mean,
No,
irrespective of the rights...
I don't think it's that. Canada is not historically in that kind of situation. Many consider that lucky. I do. Why wish upon yourself a terrible civil war that kills off thousands of people?
In order to find your identity.
In order to give you a good story as a writer. I mean, that would be totally selfish and disgusting as well. each book has its own set of assumptions and axioms, and to some extent the writer is being accurate to those.
And yours?
Mine, well, it depends what kind of book I'm writing at the time. Edible Woman is an anti-comedy. That is, it uses a lot of the conventions of the standard comedy, including the marriage at the end, but the wrong people get married. Not the heroine.
Right.
Other people get married. People that shouldn't get married get married. Surfacing is a ghost story, among other things. Life Before Man is a realistic novel in the mode of, say, Middlemarch. That is, there are no ghosts, there are no supernatural happenings. People are limited in their behavior to the way that people really do behave. Nothing extraordinary, nothing South Sea Island, nothing Treasure Island, nothing kidnapped, nothing Heart of Darkness takes place in it.
But you defend, let's say, in Life Before Man, the bleak emotional relationships, the bleak marriages, or the bleak, as being
Since
what you
that's
see.
since that's what I'm writing about in that book, that doesn't mean I always have to write about that or that nothing else exists. It means that in that book, that's what I was looking at, because you can't look at everything in the world all at the same time, can you? No. I deliberately made the focus of that book very narrow, which makes it a very claustrophobic book. It takes place in about 1 square mile of Toronto, right around the museum. And nobody comes into that space from outside, and nobody goes out of it during the course of the entire book except a dead body. That's the only thing that goes out.
Interesting.
But a lot of what writers do have to do with writing books, just as what you have to do.
Right.
What you do has to do with making films. Films have certain conventions, and you violate some of them by putting yourself in the film.
These are my
But it's just as much a
preconceptions.
working with convention. It's just that you've taken that convention of the documentary and turned it around.
So you've read the bits about families,
Yeah.
and?
And I think that she when she's writing about modern urban bourgeois society, most families are fragmented, like those she writes about.
It's so consistent, the hostility with which mothers are treated and fathers are treated, especially fathers who are either not there or completely ineffectual, that I think it must mean something a little bit more than that.
The first story I wrote had a horrible father, and it wasn't my father. It was my friend's father.
Okay, but what do writers base they base it on their friends, but they also ultimately draw on their own conception of life, their own experiences.
She's a writer. It's a craft. She's created stories that are about
I understand that, but I think you find clues to people's life view.
in the poems.
And in the books.
Watch out for stumps.
Okay.
And are you drawing?
What am I doing? Well, I've chosen something incredibly difficult to do because I'm doing you.
Oh, how
But
wonderful.
I can't see you see.
Well, that's very symbolic, isn't it?
So, but a writer's inspiration comes from somewhere. And it really puzzles me that
I mean, that quality that you're finding about the families not getting on together isn't in the poetry, for instance.
yes,
Is
but,
it?
but nor are families in the poetry
Right.
that much.
They're not.
No.
Who was it who said that all happy families are the same, but each unhappy family is unhappy in a different way? I don't believe that all happy families are the same, but if you're writing a novel, and that's a different thing from writing autobiography.
Right. No, I understand that.
And if you're writing a novel with a central character who has to, for instance, confront society,
Right.
or be in an isolated situation, act separately, act as a single person.
Right.
If you gave such a character a happy, supportive family, you can see, well, Tom Jones, for instance. If Tom Jones had known who his father was all along, you wouldn't have had a story,
Yeah.
would you?
No.
If Pip hadn't been an orphan, you wouldn't have had a story. People are very, very eager to try to make any artist's work be particular and individual to that artist.
Right.
In other words, to say this only has to do with this one person.
Right.
Therefore, we are off the hook. This isn't saying anything
No,
about
right.
us, the readers.
No, right.
Oh, it's only because so-and-so fell on their head when
That's
they were
right.
3
That's
or
why
whatever.
they write that way.
And that's why they write that way, and therefore we don't have to pay any attention to it.
But it doesn't necessarily follow.
Yes, but that's what that kind of criticism is for. The kind of criticism that is entirely biographical and interprets everything, therefore, in terms of the individual's biography. And says, you know, none of the comments about society in it really apply because this person has this view because they were traumatized in childhood. I don't buy it. In a novel, I'm interested in seeing characters put in positions in which they have to make choices. I mean, choices that really will affect them, not like what they're going to have for breakfast. Or whether they're going to, you know, get a small promotion in their work. I would rather see them in positions in which they have to make choices that not only affect themselves, but also affect other people, adversely or positively, and which they have to really pay for.
Right.
I think modern Canadian urban life doesn't provide those situations very often. You know, those clear-cut, dramatic situations. Shall I save myself or shall I run back into the burning building and try to rescue old Miss Jones? You know, that kind of thing. You don't often have those kinds of choices in an ordinary person's life. So what you're telling me really is maybe I shouldn't write about ordinary people. Maybe I should write about extraordinary people.
What do you say to that?
I don't know. I don't really feel that it's up to you to tell me what I should be writing about.
I didn't say it. You said it. You posed the question.
But I think you're perfectly welcome to offer your opinion. I'm not offering any conclusions here. I'm just
Right, you're
giving
just
you a
thinking
few
out
things
loud.
that occasionally go through my head.
Admitting a certain defeat, we turned the film equipment over to the Atwoods. They could go ahead and make their own portrait.
There. Who is this woman?
That's the topic.
Well, that woman is my daughter, and she's incognito.
Harold. Harold, would you come over?
One last
Okay.
thing.
And who is this woman?
You've got me.
Who is this woman, Evan?
My aunt.
This woman is the head of the Ku Klux Klan masquerading as Margaret Atwood.
Okay, Michael Rubbo's whole problem is that he He thinks of me as mysterious and a problem to be solved, right? And for that reason, he spent a lot of the time so far trying to get the clue, trying to solve this problem. This afternoon, he was off on attack that somehow my family had been repressively benevolent. And I mean, he's trying to find out why some of my work is somber in tone, shall we say, and he's trying for some simple explanation of that in me or in my life rather than in the society that I'm portraying. I mean, do you think that your work being somber in tone is entirely to do with you, or do you think it might have something to do with the century that you live in?
I'm surprised when literature isn't somber in tone.
Yes, there you are. But does your surprise come because somebody dropped you on your head when you were 3? Or because that's what you see when you look around?
It's what you see.
But do you see it that way because of something in you or because it's really there?
Well, because it's there.
I rest my case.
It's a somewhat biased courtroom.
Of course, I suppose anybody's going to say that, aren't they?
Yeah.
7 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, there's a single from
Can I have a peek?
What's the bit? Parents?
Yeah, it's
2
2 diamonds.
No, 2 diamonds.
2 diamonds. Yeah.
A bit, 1 club.
Anyway, have a wonderful rest for the rest of your vacation. And we'll see you possibly, I hope.
Are you getting into the boat right now?
Well, I'm waiting for Harold. Is that
You're
on?
going with them. Right. I think something that shocked me when I was younger was going out into the world and realizing that very few parents were as benevolent towards their children as mine were, and it still does shock me to hear these stories of what parents have done to their children, or bizarre behavior of parents, or parents attempting to mold their children, or disinheriting their children, or being mean to their children, or being hypercritical of their children. I don't really know why they do it. It's a mysterious area to me, which is, I suppose, why I write about it.
And it bothers you?
Well, it bothers me as a problem, you know. It also bothers me when I hear about it because I feel that the children have not been treated right, of course. But so that's much more the right reason why I put those kinds of figures into my books. It's not because my own parents are like that. It's because my own parents aren't like that.
That was the puzzle to me, that somebody who'd been so well looked after should then turn around and go zap society and produce all of these monstrous people.
See, we would have to be more specific about the books. And when you go through them, well, there's Life Before Man, in which the parents are write-offs. I mean, they're pretty much gone. And the bad parent figure is an aunt who is in fact pretty closely based on the aunt of somebody that I knew. I don't usually use real people, but this one happened to be dead, and I asked permission from the niece, and I said, can I use your aunt? Because she told me these awful stories about this woman and how she was treated by her as a child. And she said, go ahead, she might as well be useful for something. And in fact, I had to tone that aunt down. She was much worse in real life. But she was so bad that she was unbelievable. Do you know what I mean? She's pretty Dickensian as it is, but if I had put in everything I knew about her, she would have been just off the map.
But let's add it up. Okay, her parents are dismissed in a page.
The ones in Surfacing are benevolent but dead.
Yes, but we're not. You couldn't talk to them though because
the ones in Lady Oracle are definitely unsatisfactory.
Right.
The mother is quite mean,
right,
and unhappy and dissatisfied, and the father is just a non-participant. He He doesn't really, he kind of absents himself.
And in bodily harm?
Bodily harm,
They're
the
not
parents
very-
are untouching.
Right.
It's that curious southern Ontario and probably possibly trans-Canadian habit of just not touching other people a lot, this body space, you know, it's always quite... And in fact, I met someone recently who says that her parents never touched her at all. She can't ever remember having been touched by her parents when she was growing up. They didn't have fights. They didn't touch each other either, to her knowledge. They must have at some point because she was there. But it was just this kind of plexiglass container that everybody was supposed to walk around in.
But you can see how one could be puzzled. I mean, it adds up to a bleak cast of characters.
Well,
No?
look at the statistics, Michael.
Bye, Grandma. Bye-bye. Mommy, run up to the deck. You can think about it from up there.
They'll have gone by then.
Please pass the bag of marshmallows. Can I do Michael's?
When somebody is really, really freaked out by me in the evil stepmother direction, it's usually a man. I think people in general, men as well as women, expect more from women artists in the area of their behavior. In other words, we still want them to be good mothers, whether they're mothers or not. We still want them to be seen as kindly and benevolent, because the idea of an evil mother, you know, or let's put it another way, a woman who is not soft and feminine, is frightening to both sexes. You know, that's our mother. It might be our mother dealing in this sinister imagery.
Do you think that's part of the difficulty that Mike's having with you in terms of this mystery he's trying to find?
In honesty, no.
What do you?
I don't feel that Michael is freaked out in that particular way. I don't think he thinks I'm an evil person. I don't think he finds me threatening or vampiristic or Medusa-like or any of those things. He wants to see artists as people who are complex and haunted, you know, by something or other, and he wants to find out what I'm haunted by. And I think he's come to the conclusion that it's probably not my family.
Are you haunted?
Well,
I mean, is that if you were
what
to?
is haunted? What is haunted? I think he wants to know what drives me on, what makes me do the work. The easy answer to that is that I write because I'm a writer. However, here's a clue for Michael. The influences on my novel writing were very much 19th century English, and my idea of what the novel was doing came more from people like Dickens than from people like Samuel Beckett, for instance. I do see the novel as an interaction with the society.
But do you think of yourself, if you'd have to choose between haunted and unhaunted, do you think of yourself as haunted?
Sometimes, on some days, I sit and I look at what I'm writing and I think, how can I be writing this? You know, this is dreadful, it's appalling, I don't mean bad stylistically, but it's horrifying. And sure, I have the same questions that Michael has. Where does it come from? Well, for me, it comes from what I'm looking at. The point is, I suppose, why I'm looking at that, but these days, I don't see how you can avoid it.
Well, I mean, I think there's a problem with words like demons and haunting, because it's in the tradition of the artist as an absolutely tortured soul, you know? And a lot of writers have exploited that. It's the kind of the stock in trade, and the Lowrys and the Dylan Thomases, and one can think a lot to the 19th century examples, that the artist is somehow cursed, and that therefore, because some artists are cursed, that all art must come from being cursed, you know, and a lot of writers don't accept that. And certainly Peggy doesn't, I don't. You know, instead of asking about demons and hauntings, you know, maybe ask about the muse, you know, which is a much more classical thing.
What do you mean by muse?
Well, I mean, it's there. I mean, Renaissance poets dedicating their poems to their muse or referring to the muse. It's a voice. It's a voice which is a positive, and it's a creative thing. And the muse sustains and encourages and leads. You know, which is a much it seems to me less self-indulgent way of looking at art, less psychological way of looking at art, because there were artists before there was psychiatric theory.
So I asked her if she had a muse.
So if you asked the same question, if you asked yourself the same question.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And?
Yes, I would say I did have one, but only for poetry.
Mm. And is it male or female?
It's female.
It's female?
Mm.
And does it have a shape or form? Or?
Old.
It's an old?
Old.
An old woman?
Mm.
Ah.
Mm. You want us to hold hands?
Is parenting done equally? I hate that word, but...
Parenting isn't a job, it's a condition of the universe.
It depends very much on the stage of the child's development too. I mean, because children tend to go from one to the other.
And
Mostly the mother, very strongly the mother.
Mummies are important when they're young.
Mm. How did you meet, and was it instant attraction?
No. We met at a party for Milton Acorn in 1971, I think. No, could it have been 1970?
An alternative Governor General's Award because he hadn't won it. Mm. And so it was, someone dubbed it the People's Governor General's Award for the People's Poet.
Ah.
So we were both there, and we had both not won the Governor General's Award that year, which was for 1969, and I had thought that Graham's book, Five Legs, was very good, and said that I thought that possibly he ought to have won it.
Mm. Which was absolutely compelling to me, of course, because
yes.
here she arrives at
no flattery intended. It was just the kind of remark one makes.
This noisy party at Grossman's in Toronto, and she told me she thought that my book should have won the Governor General's Award, when hers was one of the three.
And conversely, you said.
So
no, he didn't.
No.
I said, my goodness, I had forgotten. I said I was overcome, Peggy, as I so frequently am.
He melted into the crowd, and I melted out of the party.
That's right.
You told me that he never knows what you're doing. Do you know what he's doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How does that come about?
I have, on 3 different occasions, shown versions of a work to other people, and not known or not accepted that it was as bad as secretly I knew it was. I had to somehow show it to somebody else. And in each case, it was disastrous. I mean, I shouldn't have done it.
What
and I won't do it again.
In this particular
case? She
case?
told the truth.
Yeah.
And that I wasn't. I mean, I felt she overstated it rather, but.
But I ought to have said no.
Yes, and you will say no the next time.
I certainly will.
But there won't be a next time.
Because I don't think that the person that you're living with, or indeed any member of your family, ought to be put on the spot like that. I mean, all they ought to be saying to you is, "You're wonderful."
Right.
You know, you're absolutely superlative, and have a cup of tea. And if you have a headache, lie down and have a rest. I'll rub your feet. But apart from that, they should not make any comment on your work. I think that was one of the loveliest things about my mother. I mean, no matter what you did, she would always say it was wonderful.
So where do you go from here?
Ever onwards. You catch me at a moment at which I'm trying to figure out where I am going from here. So I can't really tell you. If I had started a novel, I would say, well, I'm going to finish this novel. But in fact, I have 3 possible novels, and I haven't decided which to start. So all I can say is that I will hang around until it becomes clear to me which one of these I should be writing, and then I will write it.
You're waiting for a sign?
I'm just waiting for that moment at which you decide this is the one. You mean, am I waiting for a big thumb to come out of heaven? That's you. No, I'm not waiting for that.
You worried about this?
Wouldn't you be worried about this if it were you?
I never answered the question. I left the island. I knew that for the most part she had eluded us. Yet that is her right. Why should she reveal what haunts her, if anything does? Especially when she knows quite well that we like it much better that she remain private and mysterious. For me, she's an island on which no boats land. They circle, they peer at her, but no boats land. That's how I have seen her, through binoculars.